a pilot experiments with magic mushrooms for the first time, and 48 hours later, while he's off duty, he's in the cockpit trying to take a plane down. Let's talk about what happened in today's video. Sir, are you okay? You've been in the car for hours. Y'all, it's fall, and I'm still going strong with my Drift subscription, and we're going to talk about what I got in the mail today. Okay, y'all, if you follow me, you know I've already worked with Drift. I absolutely love them. So let's talk about what Drift is. So Drift creates air care products for your car and your home. Now, they're Scentbird's sister company, and if you follow me, you already know I love them too. So I love all the companies that are associated with each other with this brand. All the materials they use are sustainable, and the scents are made with natural, essential, and fragrance oils. And the kicker to this, y'all, the best part, is the products range from $9 to $15, okay? I mean, absolutely love that. So the best part about this that I love is it is a monthly subscription service. So what they do is they send you a starter kit and it has this thing in it. You'll see me put it in the car. And then you get your driftwood. Oh my God, I love it. We'll talk about the scent in a second. So you get it in the mail. It's super easy. It comes to you and then you're good to go. Now you'll get the monthly refills and they recommend changing it every 30 days. So the best part is the scent of the month. It features a limited edition scent. Now this is always usually inspired by the season and like memories and that kind of stuff that goes along with it. So like I said, right now it's fall, y'all, and they sent me teak. It's the cedar for me, okay? Oh my, it captures this season and the leaves change and all that. Roscoe, what do you think?
Yeah, it reminds me of the first doghouse where I was born.
Rips your heart out. Now, another thing that we're all about here at the Sofa Squad is flexibility with these subscription services, and Drift does not disappoint. You can change your scent choice, frequency, and you can cancel anytime you want. I mean, they're just amazing. So they sent me teak this month, and it has in it musk, amber, pepper, teak, and cedar. Oh my God. It smells so good. Now, another thing I really like about them are these reusable bags that they send to you. And what the idea is you store the thing in it between uses in the car. Now, at first, when I first started, I was like, I'm going to be a responsible Drift owner and put this in here and really get my mileage out of it, which you 100% can. But here's the thing. You know, I got lazy about it, right? Y'all, the last one is still going good, okay? So I was just like, oh, wow, amazed by that. Now, of course, you want the full flavor, right? So this will help it last even longer, but don't worry about like, oh, how long is it gonna last? Y'all, it keeps going, it keeps giving. In fact, it's given, take my money. So be sure to use our code SOFA at Drift for 55% off. Y'all, it's less than $5 for your first month. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the Sofa. Sofa's back there with Mr. Roscoe, and my name is Paul. Today, we're going to be talking about a recent case that has now happened, and this was the off-duty pilot who tried to take the plane down that he was riding on. He was riding in the jump seat in the cockpit, and we'll get into the specific details and all that type of stuff about it. Now, the way that we are going to review this video, it's going to be video clips and a lot of articles and whatnot. They'll appear on the screen. You can kind of read along, or you can just listen to me talk about it. And then at the very end of the video, I'll share some of my opinions and things of that nature on it. So let's go ahead and start with let's build the foundation, and let's get on the same page as to what happened and who we're dealing with.
Federal prosecutors charged Emerson with one count of interfering with a flight crew. That comes on top of state charges where Emerson is facing more than 80 counts of attempted murder. According to court documents, the off-duty pilot was riding in a cockpit jump seat on a flight from Everett, Washington to San Francisco Sunday when he told the pilots, "I'm not okay." Prosecutors say Emerson tried to shut off the plane's engines by pulling the red fire handles.
Emerson, a father with an unblemished flying history, telling police he struggled with depression and a friend recently passed away. And it was his first time taking mushrooms.
Okay, so here we have some of the basic details. So Emerson had been struggling with depression. This is what he says. A friend had recently passed away, and he had recently experimented with magic mushrooms for the first time. So he's in the jump seat. He gets up, "I'm not okay." He tries to pull these, two things that would basically, we'll hear what the pilots will say that it would have done, but had he been able to pull them, absolutely not good, okay? Like this flight, like these people were like that close to Bye-bye. Okay, so let's go ahead and start digging beneath the surface of this and seeing exactly what happened. And we're going to go ahead and refer to one of those articles now and go through it and review it. Okay, so the first article that we're going to review is by Pete Munting, Sherry Mossberg, and Josh Campbell. This is through CNN. And the title here says, you see the plane, off-duty pilot accused of trying to shut off airline's engines mid-flight said he took magic mushrooms 48 hours before the incident, court documents say. On the second image we see it says the off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot accused of attempting to disable a plane's engines mid-flight told investigators he believed he was dreaming and had taken magic mushrooms 48 hours before the incident, according to state court records. Joseph D. Emerson, 44, attempted to cut fuel to the plane's engines while the flight was en route from Washington State to San Francisco on Sunday, authorities say. The quick actions of the aircraft's captain and first officer kept the engines from failing completely, the airline said. Emerson told investigators he had consumed magic mushrooms approximately 48 hours before or prior to the incident on the plane, an affidavit filed by prosecutors states. He also said he had been awake for the last 40 hours, according to a separate federal court document. Now let's go ahead and go to another clip and look at that.
Enter not guilty plea on all counts.
As we learned, he allegedly told investigators he had taken psychedelic mushrooms for the first time some 48 hours before the incident and thought he was having a nervous breakdown after going without sleep for 40 hours.
Now, just a quick side note before we continue, all of these things that are being listed off, I haven't slept for 48 hours, I took magic mushrooms 48 hours. So it sounds to me like he took these and basically stayed up tripping and then had to go do this flight. Now, remember, he was off duty. He was in the jump seat. We're going to learn more about how jump seats work and that kind of thing here in a minute. But I just wanted to kind of point that out because I'm just sitting here thinking like, oh, whoa, I don't know the exact, like what happens to your brain and stuff like that, like medically. And it's like, I've been awake for this many hours and this many hours, but I can definitely imagine if you've been up for 40 hours and you had consumed a substance like this, that probably reality would be a little bit distorted. So that being said, let's keep going. Okay, on the screen here we have another bit of the article. It says Emerson told police he thought he was dreaming and believed pulling the handles of a fire extinguishing system, which cuts fuel to the aircraft's engines, would cause him to wake up, state court documents say. Emerson was riding in the cockpit in a jump seat, as is permitted for off-duty pilots, and a confrontation began when he reached for the fire controls, according to the documents. As Emerson reached for the controls, one of the pilots grabbed Emerson's wrist, and the other pilot reported that they wrestled with Emerson for a few seconds before Emerson stopped and said he was okay, the documents state, adding Emerson was not able to pull the handles all the way down before the pilots intervened. Emerson had experienced depression and the recent death of a friend, the documents say. He was having a nervous breakdown and told the flight crew he needed to be subdued, according to a separate federal criminal complaint. It's highly unlikely that psilocybin, sometimes called magic mushrooms, would still be in the pilot's system after 48 hours after use, but it's possible he could have been feeling the lingering effects of the drug, said Matt Johnson, a Johns Hopkins professor who studies psychedelics and other drugs. Johnson likened mushroom use to drinking alcohol. While a person is no longer drunk the day after drinking, the hangover caused by alcohol could impair their behavior or ability. Okay, now with that in mind, and we'll talk about some of this here in just a little bit, let's look at a quick video clip that I found that is somebody explaining on one of these planes, like the jump seat and that kind of a thing. So let's take a look at how those work.
Did you know that we have an extra seat inside the flight deck? Let me show you. So it's right here, the jump seat. We need to fold it out, raise the seat back like this, and voila. The jump seat on the 737-800.
Now, a couple of quick thoughts on that video. First of all, this could be me just being old at this point, but I looked at that seat and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can sit in that for a long amount of time, right? Can you imagine how your back would feel by the end of the flight? But also, looking at that, look at the direct access to all the controls that person has. Like in my mind, it helped me envision what went down. He just jumped up and went right for that stuff right there. The fact that these the captain and the first officer acted that quickly saved so many lives that day. Because, can you imagine you're sitting there focused on flying the plane and the person kind of behind you just is all of a sudden up messing with your controls, and not just any control, but like the control, okay? Let's keep going. Now we're going to continue on where we left off with the previous article. It says, it's possible that the lingering effects of psilocybin, I'm probably butchering that name completely wrong, I apologize, of magic mushrooms. Existing depression and sleep deprivation could have created a perfect storm in which Emerson was experiencing behavioral changes or derealization, Johnson said. Derealization is a feeling of detachment from one's surroundings. People often describe the experience as feeling as though they're in a movie or a dream. Psychotic-like behavior is among the risk of those taking magic mushrooms, particularly for those with existing psychiatric disorders, said Johnson. Emerson has been charged in federal court with interfering with a flight crew. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon announced Tuesday. That charge comes on the heels of dozens of state charges filed in Oregon, including 83 felony counts of attempted murder, 83 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. Booking records show he pleaded not guilty to all state charges on Tuesday. Now let's continue to read and see what exactly happened during this. So it says, after the cockpit confrontation, Emerson was taken to the rear of the aircraft, but then attempted to grab the handle of an emergency exit during the flight's descent, according to a release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The flight diverted to Portland, Oregon, where Emerson was taken into custody by Port of Portland police, the agency said in a statement. While in custody, he told the officers he had become depressed about 6 months ago, according to an affidavit authored by an FBI agent and included alongside the federal complaint. He denied taking any medications, the affidavit says, but he did discuss the psychedelic mushrooms with the responding officer. Now, skipping down to a couple of paragraphs towards the end, it says, while in custody, Emerson said he was admitting to what I did, per the affidavit. I'm not fighting any charges you want to bring against me, guys, he said. Now, he is being held without bail at Multnomah County Jail. He appeared in court on Tuesday wearing a blue jail uniform with his hands restrained behind his back. Now, moving on to the next screen, I want to jump down a few paragraphs here to talk about what exactly these things did that he was trying to pull. So here we go. It says, while in the cockpit, Emerson had tried to shut down both of the Embraer 175's engines by pulling its fire extinguisher handles. The airline said the fire suppression system consists of a T handle for each engine. When pulled, a valve in the wing closes to shut off fuel to the engine, Alaska Airlines said in a statement to CNN. After they are pulled, some residual fuel remains in the line. The airline said the quick reaction of the crew to reset both handles helped restore the flow of fuel and prevented the engines from cutting off. Now, it further goes on to say Emerson initially had engaged the pilots in small talk about the weather and the aircraft, the affidavit says. He then said, I'm not okay, and one of the pilots turned around to see him reaching up and grabbing the red fire handles, the affidavit says. Now, continuing to the top here, it gives us a little bit more information on like what was going down and people describing like what they saw on the plane, right, as well as the pilot. So let's talk about that. It says one of the pilots grabbed Emerson's wrist while the other declared an in-flight emergency, the affidavit says. One pilot said Emerson initially resisted and the two wrestled for about half a minute before Emerson agreed to leave the cockpit. I think he subdued one of the plane's pilots, can be heard saying in air traffic control audio. Other than that, we want law enforcement as soon as we get on the ground and are parked. After peacefully walking to the back of the plane, the affidavit says Emerson told a flight attendant, you need to cuff me right now or it's going to be bad. The crew cuffed his wrist, but during the descent, Emerson turned towards an emergency exit door and tried to grab the handle and was stopped by a flight attendant. Another flight attendant observed Emerson making statements such as, I messed everything up and that he tried to kill everybody, the affidavit says. Emerson was heard saying he had just put 84 people's lives at risk tonight, including his own. Now, when the flight did land in the Portland International Airport around 6:30 p.m., Emerson was taken into custody. No injuries were reported. All the passengers were later able to fly to San Francisco with a new crew and aircraft, the airline said, noting it is reaching out to each of them individually to discuss their experiences and check in on their well-being. Now let's move further down where it says passengers describe the emergency, because when I'm reading this, again, imagine you're a passenger. At first, you're not going to know what's going on, right? Because it's happening in the cockpit. You know how that, like if you've been on a plane, especially, you know, after 9/11, that's like shut off. You don't know what's going on up there, right? So they have no idea like how close to disaster this was. But then clearly, when they take him from the front to the back, you'd have to be like, what? And obviously, when they announce we're making an emergency landing, that's you wouldn't even have to tell me. It could be anything. We're out of coffee to we have no fuel, right? All I need to hear is we're making an emergency landing, and I'm like, we're all going to die. You know what I'm saying? Like my heart would be like boom, 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 boom at that point. So let's hear what the passengers are describing. describing. Okay, so it says 2 passengers on the flight told CNN the airline crew maintained a calm environment on the plane as the incident played out. Aubrey Gavello, one of the passengers, said she didn't realize something was wrong until a flight attendant announced over the loudspeaker that they needed to land immediately. We didn't know where we were landing and we didn't know what was wrong, but the flight attendant assured us we were safe, Gavello said on CNN's Laura Coates Live on Monday night. Later, the pilot informed passengers through the loudspeaker that there had been a disturbance in the cockpit, said Alex Wood, who was seated at the front of the plane. Wood said he was wearing headphones and slept through the incident. I was right by the cockpit, but nothing woke me up. Nothing was loud enough. Nothing was rambunctious enough to wake me up, Wood said. I mean, that would be the way to go through this experience, right? And obviously, it doesn't sound like it was a massive, like, oh my God, we're going crazy up here, kind of a thing. It was just a very, quiet type incident. They wrestled a little bit. That was it. It sounds like the defendant was kind of going in and out of maybe a coherent state, because clearly at times he's saying, cuff me up, and then other times he's trying to bring the plane down, right? It kind of reminds me for the gentleman's perspective here, and I'm not sure, I can't remember where it is, so if you remember this, drop it in the comments. The plane that crashed, but when it crashed, it basically just gently landed in the water, and the one woman was like reading a book, and she's like, I didn't even know he crashed. She's just sitting here reading a book. Can you imagine? You get up, it's like, we're getting off the plane already? No, we just landed in Lake Michigan or whatever it was, So anyways, let's keep going and seeing what other people had to say. So this is the perspective of a neighbor here. It says it was very shocking, the suspect's neighbor says. Emerson's neighbor Ed Yee told CNN it was very shocking to hear of the suspect's alleged actions. He seems like a really nice guy, nothing abnormal about him. Emerson had his most recent FAA medical examination last month, records show. He has a first-class medical certificate, the highest level of medical certificate awarded by the agency, which requires examinations every 6 months for pilots 40 and over. I think that's amazing that they do that. Emerson has worked in aviation for at least 2 decades, according to information shared by Alaska Airlines. Throughout his career, Emerson completed his mandated FAA medical certifications in accordance with regulatory requirements, and at no point were his certifications denied, suspended, or revoked. Okay, now one question that some might have, because I did as well, was, well, why is he allowed to even fly up there, right? And we could possibly see this policy change after an incident like this. It depends, I guess, on each airline and whatnot. But let's look at an article now that kind of addresses this question. You'll see on the screen it says how an off-duty pilot who'd taken mushrooms was able to fly in the cockpit. The shocking details of a near tragedy in the sky. And this is by Heather Tal Murphy, October 24th, 2023. So let's go ahead and get into it. It says nowadays airlines have a secure way to check pilots' credentials. In this case, Emerson 44 was not an imposter. He was a pilot licensed by the FAA who worked in aviation for 2 decades. Now, it also says, according to court documents, when he first showed up for the flight, there were no signs of anything unusual. Ultimately, the decision to let someone into the cockpit falls on the pilot in command of aircraft, according to the FAA. That person has final authority and responsibility for the operation and safety of the flight. In theory, they have additional checks backing them up along the way. The Airline Pilots Association International, the union representing airline pilots, told me that the U.S. pilots are continuously evaluated throughout their careers through training, medical exams, crew resource management, and other programs and audits. The Seattle Times reported that Alaska said that throughout his career, Emerson completed his mandated FAA medical certifications, and they were never denied, just like we reviewed a minute ago. Okay, so then down below, it says Emerson told a police officer that around 6 months ago he became depressed. His best friend recently died. So jumping down, it continues on some information we've already covered about his depression, his friend passing away. It goes on to say that certainly does not explain his decision to trip on mushrooms and then go get himself a seat in the cockpit. According to the Seattle Times reading of the court documents, he consumed them like 48 hours before. We don't know where he got them from or who, if anyone advised him how long the experience would last. Emerson lives in Pleasantville, California, a 20-minute drive or so from Oakland, where magic mushrooms are sold over the counter. In Washington State, where he boarded the flight, magic mushrooms are becoming increasingly legal as a means of treating depression and other mental woes. Now, it goes on to finish out the article by saying, as a pilot, Emerson is prohibited from taking a number of medications, including most antidepressants. He is also prohibited from using federally banned substances, regardless of whether they are legal in a specific state. This includes marijuana and magic mushrooms, the primary hallucinogenic compound in magic mushrooms. They said the name, but I'm not going to keep butchering it. His lawyer did not respond to a request for comment. Okay, now on that note, let's go ahead and hear from his lawyer before we start talking about everything. So let's take a few clips and hear what he has to say.
First, I want to just express from Joe to the flight crew that he is grateful for their timely and heroic actions. He would like to reiterate that he had no intention to harm himself or anybody on the airplane when he acted. He's a gifted aviator. He's a wonderful husband and father. And he is a wonderful husband.
Now, as the lawyer said, he wasn't intending to hurt anyone, anything like that. And so far, the vibe that I get, I don't think that was his intention either, right? I don't think he set out with that in mind. Evidence will show when it comes out. Now, also one thing, if you notice watching the clips, in the background there was his wife, as well as what appears to be her parents, his, parents-in-law, mother, father-in-law. Let's continue on with another article now before we start talking about everything. And now this one is going to be focused on what the wife has to say. Now on the screen here, this is by Yaron Steinbuck, and it says it's published October 27th. This is from the New York Post. It says, wife of crazed pilot Joseph Emerson says he never would have knowingly hurt anyone. So let's see what she has to say. Jumping down to the second paragraph here, it says, Sarah Stretch supported her husband Joseph Emerson, 44, on Thursday for his first appearance in federal court in Portland, Oregon, where he pleaded not guilty and waived his right to a preliminary hearing. This is not my Joe. This is not any Joe that anybody knows, Stretch said of her pilot husband, whose charges include 83 counts of attempted murder. That is not the man that I married, she told reporters after his appearance. I don't know how to explain it, but it just wasn't him. Okay, so now very quickly, let's go over one last thing. And this is like an in addition to type situation, but it has a couple of little bits in here that I didn't see in other articles. So let's read this and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, so it says, Emerson later told investigators that he had a nervous breakdown after not sleeping for 40 hours and taking psychedelic mushrooms. I didn't feel okay. It seemed like the pilots weren't paying attention to what was going on. They didn't ... It didn't seem right. Emerson told cops, you need to cuff me right now or it's going to be bad, he told a flight attendant after getting booted from the cockpit, the document states. I messed everything up, he told the crew member, adding that he tried to kill everybody. There were 83 people aboard. Okay, now the part in that I want to put there was that second paragraph where it says it seemed like the pilots weren't paying attention to what was going on. Because I thought that was interesting in that, because when he was talking earlier, them saying like almost like this disconnected with reality, trying to figure out what caused this. Now obviously there are obvious things here. Hadn't slept for 40 hours, took magic mushrooms, depression, friend went away, a lot going on, right? So the nervous breakdown thing of like, okay, well, this is what caused it, right? But then there's just other factors there. So let's just talk about a couple of things with this. So first of all, I want to talk about the hospital policy, the FAA and the airlines, what they said, where it's like, hey, look, pilots over 40, every 6 months, whatever it said, we have to do this medical checkup, this, that, and the other. Basically, this guy, he's been there a couple of decades, not a blemish on his record, so from what we know from what we reviewed here, past all this was never put on hold, nothing. Okay, so there's that. Now, I also want to see real quick, let's go to Google real quick, because I just thought of this, and this is my question I'll post, you can drop in the comments, but I'm also going to Google it, is, do pilots have to get drug tested before getting on a plane? Do pilots have to be drug tested before flying? Let's look at this. It says the pilot guys, do they get drug tested? Yes, airline pilots do get drug tested. Pilots are subject to several types of testing, including pre-employment random testing and reasonable suspicion, post-accident and return to duty drug testing. Okay, so in a nutshell, I guess my question that I was posing was, before, it doesn't matter what's going on, anytime you're going to fly that plane, we are drug testing you before you fly it. Every morning, if you fly every day you're getting a drug test. You know what I'm saying? Like, that type of thing. Now, I know that would not have prevented possibly this because he wasn't flying the plane, which goes into my next thing. Okay, so we heard from the articles that it says it's ultimately up to the pilot. Like, basically at a certain point, your life is literally in that pilot's hands, right? He is making decisions on who can come in the cockpit, that type of thing. I have no doubt that this guy right here, they were probably making small talk, a little courtesy. Hey, you can sit here. They might have worked together. So there's probably no reason to be like, oh, you can't come in here. I can see this playing out. Obviously, the guy wasn't displaying any kind of weird behavior enough for anyone to say, because if that was the case, they probably would have not let him on the plane, right? So this seems to have happened once they get going and whatnot. I mean, it did say he's making small talk. He's talking about this. He's talking about that. So there's probably no alarm there. I guess I'm looking at this through the lens of two things: how to prevent it and what happened. Because it sounds like one of those cases where the cookie crumbled in such a way that it was like you just weren't going to see this coming, right? I guess in this day and age, to learn that somebody who is not supposed to be on the flight, meaning I am the first officer, I am the captain, I am a flight crew, can sit in the cockpit. I did not know that that was allowed. I just thought that like extra people, like I get that like staff and people like that like catch planes and go here and there and all that. So, but I didn't know that they would be allowed to sit in there. I thought it was literally always on lockdown, that only the pilot could be in there. Like once you're flying, it was like the pilot and whoever's in there are locking themselves in there type situation, right? Now I know they come out to go to the bathroom and that type thing, and they have different protocols for what's going on, like with the flight attendant standing in front and all that. But I didn't know that it was like, oh yeah, you can come sit in here. So me as a passenger, if you want my little humble opinion, I'm like this. I'm like, yeah, we're good on that. Would prefer just the pilot in there, because then you get into this question too. Well, obviously there's more than just the pilot, but what I'm saying is somebody who's not flying the plane. You know what I'm saying? Like not supposed to be on there. Like the person who's just extra, catching a flight to get to their destination or whatever, where they're going to fly out up to work or however it goes. So you have two people up there. It's like, could you ever truly safeguard? Because what if something happens to the pilot or he goes rogue? Well, then you have the first officer, whoever is, up there. Well, what if both of them do something? Well, what if you had air traffic control sit in the cockpit, but then you have somebody with a gun on them up there, and what if he goes rogue? You know what I'm saying? Like the possibilities are endless, and I don't think you could really cover them all. Now, on to some of my thoughts about the gentleman, Mr. Joseph. So I do not think that this was intentionally nefarious, right? I don't think that he started off trying to be like, oh my God, I'm going to do this plan. And I don't think it was that at all, right? Couple of things. Now, this is coming from a non-pilot person, okay, right? Like, I mean, I fly or whatever, but I have no idea, right? I don't have any pilots in my family, so I don't know that. But I've known enough pilots, airline steward, people like that, to know, working in the industry, especially for pilots, right? These people are flying an airplane. Let's take out all their rules and regulations, just the stress of flying a plane, right? I could never. Okay, so there's that first thing. Secondly, all the stuff that they go through. I am guessing and imagining that in this industry, this is something that if you were to be like, hi, I'm waving a red flag, I'm having some issues going on, and a range of them, all the way from mild depression to, okay, I'm turning myself in, I shouldn't be flying for 6 months. You know what I'm saying? I imagine that any red flag of any nature raised on you is going to make your boss, meaning the airlines, be like, that type of thing, which would encourage people to not possibly seek help for things. You know what I'm saying? Now, it sounds like he had been experiencing some depression. He lost a friend. He tried magic mushrooms, this type thing. To me, this sounds like somebody who was under an extreme amount of stress and duress for a period of time leading up to this, and everything came together in this cockpit, right? I personally think what took place is all the stuff that he said, right? I don't think he's lying. I think he had a nervous breakdown mid-flight. I think all this stuff just came, and he was probably in and out of like a semi-hallucinogenic state of mind. Now we heard from the doctor, whoever the professor, that was like, look, he's not going to be like totally tripping, but he's going to probably have residual effects, just like they compared it to alcohol, where it's like you might not be drunk, but you still have it in your system, which can impair you. Accompany that with being up for 40 hours, I mean, you're going to be going through some form of like, your brain's like, kind of a thing. So he was probably like a mixture of dreaming awake, if that makes sense. And like this whole thing of like, oh, I thought if I pulled this, the office, it would make the pilot, like whatever he was thinking, right? To me, it just sounds like he was dreaming and then acting out, almost like sleepwalking, right? That type thing. I think it speaks volume that he has like extended family showing up to help, for him in court and whatnot. I think it also speaks volumes that almost immediately he was like, you need to cuff me. I mean, that goes a long way, right? So it doesn't sound like, again, that this is, intentionally I'm seeking out to harm people, that type of thing. I legitimately think he had some kind of a breakdown on the plane, in the cockpit, and that's what went down. So to me, I guess the further question is obviously to see this 83 charges against this man, right? This is crazy. I mean, I'm like, oh, whoa. I am sure they'll dwindle that down, like when they're looking for a deal. You know what I'm saying? Now, the unfortunate part in this is, will any of that help him get better? You know what I'm saying? Because one thing that I see in a lot of the cases that we follow and whatnot is the mental health aspect. You know, as we know, mental health here in the States, you know, we don't treat it like we used to years ago, right? There's a stigma with it. I mean, there always has been. I'm not saying there wasn't, but we don't have like specific institutions. Almost like jails now act as places where people with mental health issues will be sent, where it's almost like, okay, they might have done something criminal. And again, this is like a varying scale here, right? I'm not trying to say that somebody who is going out and taking the lives of numerous people, it's like, oh no, well just, you know, do this and let them on their way. I mean, I get that, right? But in certain situations where it's like, okay, you know, does this person need mental health help, or do they need to be incarcerated? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference here. You know, what can help them get better and on their way? And so to me, Joseph sounds like somebody who probably needs some mental health help, right? Now, again, from the victim standpoint, from the people who, you know, the 83 charges and whatnot, I mean, you heard several of them say we didn't even know what was going on, right? Now, after the fact, when they landed and they found out, I would have been like, I'm good. I'm walking to San Francisco, okay? And no harm, no foul. Glad we all survived. I'm not getting back in the plane today. Because when you think about how many flights are in air, like when you do a percentage, I don't even know what it is, you know, but it's like for something bad to happen, a plane to crash, whatever, it's a very low percentage when you get into that, right? Is what I'm trying to get at. So if I was on one of the planes that time happened to have one of these like one-off incidents, oh no, we were in the car, we walking, planes, trains, and automobiles, but not the plane part. Okay, so there's that. So anyways, you know, we'll continue to see what happens with this, and like I said, hopefully all can, you know, get the help that they need in this situation. And hopefully for the airlines, what I would like to see personally, like, okay, so how do we learn from this and move forward, would be policy. No, we don't have anyone that doesn't need to be in the cockpit. You know what I'm saying? Period. Like, only people who are operating that flight go in the cockpit, you know, period, end of story. It's just too much room for error. And like this right here, where it's like, you know, everything's geared up for like a terrorist or this and that, whatever. Well, then you have this of people having just mental, you know, health episodes, right? So yeah, so anyways, that is it. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Thank you once again to Drift for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description box below. Everything you need is right there. If you're still watching and little Mr. Roscoe says fly on into the comment section, drop some little sofas off for him. And once we do meet down in those sofas, or until we do, I should say, we'll see y'all there.